near Castle Rock. The city itself received light snow from a winter storm. Manufacturing output in the United States has risen for the first time in 3 months. The Federal Reserve is posting a 0.4% gain for October. It's a welcome sign after recent data showed many companies were reducing their stockpiles after ordering too much over the winter. U.S. stocks are modestly higher, with the Dow up 63 points since the open, standing at 17,546. This is NPR.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Farmers Insurance, informing people about common insurance gaps so they won't be surprised by what their policy actually covers. Agent locator and more info at farmers.com/gaps. Farmers Insurance. Know the gaps.
Columbia University's football team went 2 straight seasons without a win, and turning things around won't be simple. No one knows this better than new head coach Al Bagnoli.
In order to improve, little things have to be solved. And it's never just one huge thing, it's a combination of little things.
I'm Ilya Meritz, host of The Season, WNYC's new podcast about winning, losing, and what it takes to change the score, told in real time. Go to wnyc.org/theseason.
This is Fresh Air. I'm Terry Gross. My guests are the director of the new film Brooklyn, John Crowley, and the star, Saoirse Ronan. Ronan was nominated for an Oscar at the age of 13 for her performance in the 2007 film Atonement. She starred in the 2009 film The Lovely Bones. In Wes Anderson's recent film, The Grand Budapest Hotel, she played Agatha, the fearless and loyal girlfriend of Zero, the lobby boy. Ronan and Crowley are Irish. Brooklyn is adapted from a Colm Tóibín novel set in the 1950s about a young woman named Ailish from a small town in Ireland who's encouraged by her older sister to cross the Atlantic to New York City where she might have a better future. After a miserable voyage by ship, she arrives in New York homesick and disoriented. With the help of the Irish priest who sponsors her, she finds a room in a Brooklyn boarding house and a job in a department store. But loneliness is unending until she meets a young Italian man at a dance. Just as she's on the verge of starting a new life with him, she's called back to Ireland. Once there, she has to decide which life to choose, the familiarity and limitations of her hometown, or the possibilities and unpredictability of America. Let's start with a short scene after Ailish has arrived in Brooklyn. She's talking with the priest, played by Jim Broadbent, who sees how homesick she is.
I'd forgotten just how bad it feels to be away from home. I've enrolled you in a night class for bookkeeping, Brooklyn College. It'll be 3 nights a week, and I paid you tuition for the first semester.
Why?
Why? Not thank you.
Sorry, thank you. Why?
Well, I was amazed that someone as clever as you couldn't find proper work at home. I've been here too long. I forget what it's like in Ireland. So when your sister wrote to me about you, I said the church would try to help. Anyway, we need Irish girls in Brooklyn.
I wish that I could stop feeling that I want to be an Irish girl in Ireland.
All I can say is that it will pass. Homesickness is like most sicknesses. It'll make you feel wretched, and it'll move on to somebody else.
John Crowley, Saoirse Ronan, welcome to Fresh Air.
Thank you.
What personal meaning does this story have for you?
Well, when I was 27, I moved from Dublin to London to carry on directing plays. I was offered a play at the National Theatre in London. And when I moved there, I was struck by how different a city seems when you actually move there, when you don't have a return ticket, as it were. And my relationship to Ireland changed fundamentally. And I was quite struck by that. I thought homesickness was, I don't know, I suppose I thought it was the preserve of unhappy immigrants who had to leave because of economic deprivation. And because I'd been over and back to London all the time, I didn't actually think I'd feel that. And this book by Colm Tóibín captures that sense of sort of displacement and Dublinness that you feel when you leave your country, which is that you're obviously not from the country that you are now calling home, but equally you're not from home anymore either. You've become something else, which is an exile, I suppose, for a while.
Saoirse, I know that the story of Brooklyn has personal meaning for you.
I think initially when I read the script, I was still living at home, and you know, I'd been working in film since I was about 10.
Do you mean at
It's
home
always
with
very-
your parents in Ireland or just in Ireland?
With my parents in Ireland,
Mhm.
yeah. And it was always very important for me to find the right Irish project to be involved in. It was always very important for me to be involved in Irish film, and the right one hadn't come along. And then when I read this script, it was, even though it's a different era, it was very much my mum and dad's story, and such a similar journey to one that they had taken over to New York in the 80s. So, you know, when you're handed a script where the story is based in the two places that sort of make up who you are, you're immediately kind of curious and connected to it.
Your parents came to the U.S. from Ireland in the 1980s. Your character in Brooklyn comes to the U.S. in the 1950s. Why did your parents come to America?
Like most young people, they came over to New York for work. There was a very bad recession at home in the 80s at that time, and they, you know, both left school when they were around 15, 16, and there just weren't any jobs at home, you know. So when they were in their kind of early to mid 20s, I think my dad's family knew someone over there, and this guy got him set up with a job, and him and his friend went over actually on the 4th of July, which I only found out recently, and Mum and their friend's girlfriend followed over a couple months later.
So you were born in New York, but your family moved to Ireland when you were 3. Your parents returned there and took you with them. Why did they return to Ireland?
I think when they had me over here in New York, you know, my dad was working. He had been discovered, you know, while he was a bartender in this pub that he worked in by another Irish actor called Chris O'Neill. And so he had started in the theatre and was very much a part of that Irish theatre community. So for the first couple of years of my life, he was working away in America, and work was quite steady, I think, when it came to the theatre and different films that he was doing. And then the work just took him back home, and he started to get roles at home. And you know, I think my mum, she's actually said to me, she looked at me one day, she was a nanny, and I had a cold, and it was during a brutal New York winter, and she was taking care of the other kids, and of course I was there as well. I went to work with her, and she just looked at me, and I was, you know, sick, and she thought, I can't raise my kid like this anymore. My kid needs her own couch to snuggle on, and for me to just be able to focus my time on her was something that was, you know, very important for her. And also just to know my cousins and go to an Irish school. And so we went back when I was about 4, 3.5, 4.
Since the film is so much about homesickness, I thought I'd play an excerpt of the author of the novel Brooklyn, from which the movie is adapted, reading a section about homesickness from the novel Brooklyn. So this is Colm Tóibín reading from Brooklyn as recorded on our show back in 2012. This is a description of the character that you play, Saoirse, in Brooklyn shortly after she's arrived.
She was nobody here. It was not just that she had no friends and family. It was rather that she was a ghost in this room, in the streets on the way to work, on the shop floor. Nothing meant anything. The rooms in the house in Ireland belonged to her, she thought. When she moved in them, she was really there. In the town, if she walked to the shop or to the vocational school, the air, the light, the ground, it was all solid and part of her, even if she met no one familiar. Nothing here was part of her. It was false, empty, she thought. She closed her eyes and tried to think, as she had done so many times in her life, of something she was looking forward to. But there was nothing, not the slightest thing, not even Sunday. Nothing maybe except sleep. And she was not even certain she was looking forward to sleep. In any case, she could not sleep yet, since it was not yet 9 o'clock. There was nothing she could do. It was as though she had been locked away.
And that's Colm Tóibín reading from his novel Brooklyn, which is the basis of the new film Brooklyn. And That reading was from Fresh Air in 2012. With me is John Crowley, who directed the film. Also with me is Saoirse Ronan, the star of the film. You know, that part of the story really speaks to the loneliness and sense of being cut off that you experience, I think, not only as an immigrant, but anytime you're in a strange place with no one you know and you're yearning for home. And in that sense, I think, you know, it's such a universal experience, even if you've never been an immigrant. Of course, it's probably worse if you're an immigrant and this is like your whole future and you don't know if you'll ever get to the point where it feels like home. In the story of Brooklyn, when she returns, when Saoirse, your character, returns to Ireland, she's been changed by living in America. Time has elapsed. Everyone she knows has changed a little. The town has changed a little, not that much. But her experience of the town has changed a lot because of everything that she's experienced. And have you gone through similar experiences of like returning home and feeling different about it because of how you've changed?
Yeah, I have. Colum's writing just captures it so perfectly and beautifully, and it's so kind of heartbreaking, you know. And I think that's the real heartbreaking experience when you're homesick, is actually when you return home and you realise that you've had experiences that are now separate from this place that was so familiar to you and was very much your identity for your whole life. And Ailish actually says when she returns back to Ireland, and there's a scene between her and Jim walking on the beach, and she says, you know, I wish it could have been like this before I left. But of course it couldn't have been, because she wasn't the person that we see kind of blossom in New York, you know. And yeah, I mean, I've been experiencing that, I suppose, my whole life. I mean, it's certainly more extreme now that I'm older and I actually lived away on my own. But, you know, from the age of about 10, just going away for a month at a time to America and working over there and having an experience that just in no way could be shared with, you know, other kids my age that I went to school with. And again, kind of like what you have to do when you move away and you leave a piece of you back at home. When you come back home then and you've had these experiences, I kind of felt like that was something that needed to be kept separate. So it wasn't really something I talked about.
If you're just joining us, I have two guests. Saoirse Ronan is the star of the new film Brooklyn. John Crowley directed it. Let's take a short break, then we'll talk some more. This is Fresh Air.
Victims or refugees?
Many of these refugees are the victims of terrorism themselves. That's what they're fleeing. Slamming the door in their faces would be a betrayal of our values.
At one point during the November 14th attacks, fleeing terrified Parisians looked like fleeing terrified refugees from Syria. Open arms or closed borders now? That's next time on The Takeaway, weekday afternoons at 3 on 93.9 FM.
This is Fresh Air, and if you're just joining us, I have two guests. John Crowley is the director of the new film Brooklyn, and Saoirse Ronan is the star of the film. Saoirse, you were not only emotionally close to the story, you were geographically close to the story. The parts in Ireland were shot, I think, within a half hour of where you grew up and where your family continues to live. Do I have that right?
Yeah, almost. My family live in Dublin now, but yeah, I grew up in County Carlow, which is one county over from Wexford. And you know, there were times when I was a kid where the one screen cinema in our town might not have had the film that we wanted to see, so we'd go to Enniscorthy because they had, like, you know, 3 screens in their cinema. That was the big cinema.
That's where that's where Brooklyn is set.
That's where Brooklyn is set in Enniscorthy, and we shot it there. And you know, to go there, as I said before, my childhood and that part of my life and work were always kept separate, and we moved away when I was about 18, and so that phase for me is very much in the past, even though it's something I still sort of grieve in a way. So to go back into that with work and meet people who were a part of that stage of my life that had nothing to do with film at all was very, very surreal. It really was.
Are these people who actually ended up in the film?
Yeah, extras in the film, in the dance hall and in the church, and you know, a lot of them were my age, and they were kids that I had competed against, say, in sports days and at art competitions and things like that. And there were loads of kids that came up to me and were like, Saoirse, do you remember me? Do you remember that race that we took, or that, 400 metre relay when we were 10? And it was mad. It was like, it was a lot of pressure, because you don't want to let any of these people down.